Well, hello, Sandy.
Amy, hello.
How are you today?
We are taping for our listeners on a Friday, and I thought I had a full afternoon. It is clear, so I am a little high on life right now. A clear Friday afternoon on a beautiful fall day. The
Uh,
options are endless.
that's awesome. I love it.
How about you?
Oh, good. The weekend is here. This is Friday afternoon. I'm like, all right, bring on the weekend. This is
Hey.
good. So it's like, woohoo. So last week we talked about, or last episode, we talked about what you would do with $1 million. And I keep thinking about it this week, but we asked our listeners and we got more responses. So, Sandy, you want to share some of the additional responses we
Yeah,
got?
we just got a couple more responses, and I thought they were great, and I loved that episode. So thank you so much. It brought me great joy to read all these different things and have people have felt responses back. But I got two more, and one was from Rebecca, and she said fund 500. So it's very specific, $500,000 of scholarships to college and trade schools. Give gifts to family in dollar amounts, children, nieces, nephews, so younger family members, buy books for an entire week at a bookstore for whoever came in. Isn't that one great? And that goes back with what we're talking about today. I'm like, it's like the lady who was handing out money at the restaurant or at the grocery store and the gas station. Donate to charities near and dear to my heart, pay off personal debt, and then go on a dream vacation, whatever that may be, for my entire family. I just loved how it was thought out, even the scholarships, including trade shows, the dollar amount. I mean,
Right.
again, it's like, let's get some funding. And then the next one was get a home, buy a home closer to our son, pay off our other son's college debt, and then donate the rest to build a safe, affordable housing, build safe, affordable housing for individuals with developmental disabilities.
Oh my goodness. I love how generous people are.
I'm inspired by the kindness and generosity, and it's authentic, right? Like everything I read had a lot of authenticity to it and well thought out and from the heart. So, and hey, and we can still buy a wardrobe and pay for a landscaper and not have to apologize, right?
Exactly. Thank you for that.
See, Fridays are all about giving each other grace too.
Great. Thanks.
We typically go on Mondays, we're a little bit more serious.
Okay, gotta love a Friday. All
Okay.
right, so that's great. I'm glad that was a fun conversation and just thinking it through and all the options. It could be very fun if only we could get funded, right?
If you don't have the $1 million, the options are if something does come up to, even if it's a smaller quantity, you've kind of thought out your priority points with having a little bit of extra spending money, right?
Right, right. Yes. Yeah, maybe you'll get a tax refund and a little
Hey,
bit of an idea to what to do with it. Maybe.
maybe.
Okay, so today we are talking about books and we're talking about unbanned books as our title, but we're just going to go around the whole book conversation
Which
and
means we're not stuck with just the banned books. So
exactly.
this is not a political statement. It's the banned and the unbanned.
Yes, it's everything, everything. And so, what did you read this summer? Did you have some good reading?
I am always reading. So I pulled up my book because usually it's top of mind. So right now, I have read 84 books this year, and I'm going to look at which ones. And I read everything. Like right now, I'm reading Oliver Twist. But then I finished, and that's why I'm reading David Sedaris at the same time. So I mean, I'm all over the place. Um, so if I look at what I have read, the things that David Sedaris totally, I didn't even know who he was, and he came to town at Durango, and I thought, well, I better read something of his, and I listened, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I really like him, and I like his style, and so I've been pretty much binge listening, reading, and then I'm actually taking a master class in writing from him, which is very entertaining, and reading and listening have been a master class by themselves with him. So I would tell you He is awesome. Another thing, I reread The
So
Diary of
I,
Anne Frank too.
I'm trying to look at his books because I have read some of his books too, and I don't know which ones.
Okay.
It's been a while.
So a
So
lot of them will fall into, like there's the one that's coming up that I haven't read yet is How to Dress Her Family in Corduroy and Denim, and that goes back to his childhood. The one that he wrote, the most recent one, which is Happy Go Lucky, was very interesting because the essays came from COVID and his father dying, and he does still go back because he writes essays, right? So he can go all over. And I've actually in some of his books, there's been repeats too. Because there's some books I haven't read. My friend's like, oh, wait till you read the one about his sister dying. I'm like, oh, that wasn't Happy Go Lucky too. So there's some repeats too.
yeah. I can't remember. I can't find it, but I remember he's kind of eclectic and kind of
Very.
and very interesting. So he is a good, interesting read.
I'm in love with the Thursday Night Murder Club books, and number 4 came out. The author is Richard Osman. I'm just in love with those books. And he was is a screenwriter in Great Britain, a very popular, and you can tell because when I say screenwriter, sorry, he writes series for TV. Because you know how TV shows get better and better, he keeps getting better and better. I'm still reading all the Agatha Christie in order. The other one I would recommend is, see how excited I get. It just came out in a movie, and it is about the Osage murders, and it's the movie with Leonardo DiCaprio, and I believe
Oh,
it's a David
yes.
Dean book.
That movie, I saw the clip for that movie. It looks really good, and it's based on a true story.
Totally. So I would recommend reading the book first because the book has that journalistic approach, kind of like a Krakauer. It has that feel to it. Um,
All right. Well,
what do you have on your list? Sorry,
I'll
I'm just
share. No, that's okay. Um, I I went, so I read almost anything too. And
right.
so one of the things that I read this year, that one thing I don't read is Greek mythology. It just has never been on my radar of, hey, I want to read that, right?
I've got
And
one on my bookshelf and it just keeps staring at me.
well, I read Circe. I
Oh,
think I think is that the one on your bookshelf?
hold on.
And here's what I will tell you is it was so enjoyable.
Really?
I was pleasantly surprised. And what I loved about it, so I wouldn't have read it, but it was our part of our book club. And I was like, oh, I am not interested in this at all, but I will try it. And I started it. It was so good. And I'm like, all right, I guess I do read Greek mythology now.
Look
So
at
bring it on.
you.
Yes, it was really good. And then a real light one was Lessons in Chemistry. Did you read that?
Oh, loved it.
Oh,
And
me
now they have
too.
the series out.
Yes, it was really good. Being a female in STEM, I was like, I can't imagine that time period in the 50s where, women couldn't put their name on papers,
Right.
research papers. They weren't, just things like that. So I really loved that. And then we've talked about some of the other books I read this summer, the Think Again, which is just about thinking differently about things, and the
Right.
Strength to Strength, where you're young and you're an innovator, and then your strength is and older is more wisdom and putting it all
Right.
together, which is very good. Yeah. What else do you have?
So now I have to give a confession right here. I am very organized with my book reading and I keep track of everything on Goodreads. So if anybody wants to connect with me on Goodreads, I tell you 98% of the time I write reviews too. With all these books I read. So it's probably my favorite social media, but I'm noticing I found the book for some reason it didn't enter as a date. Like I didn't get credit for it, gosh forbid. For Killers of the Flower Moon. That's the book. So I was getting a little flustered because I was looking for it on my Goodreads read list and it wasn't. So that is an oversight on my part. Um, Other things that I have read.
I
Uh,
did a children's book this year, which was called The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse.
I buy that book and send that as gifts.
Do you?
Ew. I
I
said
had
it,
never read it before.
it's
It's
beautiful.
it is beautiful. It's it's just beautiful. And you can read it in about an hour and it's just if even an hour. But it's just beautiful. It's like a great big Hallmark hug.
And the illustrations are gorgeous.
Yes, they are gorgeous. Yes, I completely agree. Okay. So what method of reading do you do? Do you do a actual book in your hand, ebook, audiobook?
Yes,
Yes.
I
Okay.
do all of them.
Yes, I'm the
And
same.
I do all of them. And once I know I want to read a book, I'll see if verbally I'll hear in our book club. We do a virtual book club and, or I do a physical book club in town too with our local bookstore. And if people recommend books, I always ask how they took it in. And then if they would, if it was Audible, would they do that again? What their thoughts are. So I usually, if I get a recommendation, I'll ask. If it is a memoir, by the author, and especially if the author is an actor, somebody who has that type of training, I always listen, which I will. Bono's Surrender was amazing in audiobook, and my friend has listened to it twice. She enjoyed it so much. I would
Nice.
highly recommend that. So that will kind of determine what I do in audiobook. And I do like suspense in audiobook too, just because it's like, I don't know, having that read to me has that kind of clarity too. And then with ebook versus regular book, I consume ebook faster. And because I have such an inventory, which now I know that is it Circe? Am I pronouncing that?
The groups called it Circe.
Circe. So now Circe is on my list, but instead of buying new, I'm making myself read. This was a gift from a friend, but it was a little daunting to me because it was Greek mythology. So now,
Yes.
what's
So
what's your approach?
I do all. It kind of depends on what's convenient.
Right,
So I do like the audiobooks that are read by someone interesting. Those are always fun to listen to.
right,
And the ebooks are so easy just to download, but then, sometimes I have a book in my hand and that's easy too. I like that. Um, but I will tell you with my vision getting worse, audio or ebooks are easier and easier because I can make the type bigger and bigger. So I
right.
do like that option.
And I like
Now,
the searchable. Like sometimes I might get lost in a character and I like to be able to look back, right? Or look
right?
them up and say, remind me who this person was again.
Yes. So do you get your books at the library or do you purchase?
Because I have such an inventory and my friend worked at a bookstore, I don't need to go to the library because I'm still working through my physical books.
Okay, for
I
audio.
will on occasion. Audio, I'm addicted to Audible. I pay for it because I also like the freebies in the podcast. They have a lot of things that I like about it. So I'm all good paying for my subscription through Audible because of the extra content I get from them. I'll
Okay,
I'll download, and actually they have a lot for free on older books, and because like Oliver Twist, it was
right.
free. And so I'll go into their catalogs. How about you for audio?
So I use the library a ton because I have a library just down the street here, and I've figured out that I can get audiobooks and also ebooks through the library. Okay. And what I have learned though is that I was reading an article. The reason I asked that question specifically is because libraries right now are having, or publishers and libraries are kind of having a little bit of a conflict
Okay,
because libraries' mission is to provide content for the public, to
right.
provide material for free for the public. Okay. publisher's mission is to sell books.
Right.
Okay. So when a library buys an ebook, they buy it for a certain amount. It's more than a normal because they get it like a license, and the publishers make less money because it's available at the library. And so people will get on waiting list at the library and wait for it, and publishers are losing money because they're providing that content.
So then do they restrict what goes to the does the library have less of an inventory because certain books don't want to be distributed to them?
Well, yes, and that's where the library's issue is, because they want to provide content to the public and they want to make it accessible for people who can't afford to buy books, and so it's like, okay, if you're going to limit, then we're not doing the public the service that
Right.
we want to do. We're not, so there's this huge conflict and the publishers are wanting more money. So it kind of, my perspective shifted a little bit of, should I be buying these books instead of using the library when I do the ebook and the Audible?
That's a great point.
Yes. It's just because the writers aren't making the money.
And I'm just, again, in fact, I had a friend that texts me yesterday because she's having a big commute and she was exploring different things for audiobooks. And she asked me the question, are you using the library? I said, I can't tell you what's better or worse. I'm very fond of Audible for a lot of different reasons. It works for me very well, and I have no problem paying the membership. But I know a lot of people who use the library, but I've never researched that side. So I'll be curious what she found out, as she looked into it. But I do want to support the writers because, like David Sedaris, that's what he does for a living. And Ann Patchett wrote a great book about becoming a writer called The Getaway Car. And, they have to work really hard. And the books themselves, because you see a book that is acclaimed doesn't mean they're making buku bucks from it either. It's really the touring and the additional income that comes from that. So I definitely want to support them as artists, right?
Right. Right. I completely want to keep everything accessible at the library, but
Yes.
I also don't want me to take advantage of it just because it's there, because I can buy a book. It's not going to hurt me to buy a book.
Which I'm going to throw in a little plug right here.
Yeah.
So Amy, the plug is, we talked about past podcasts. We are having a couple of guests. We had talked about this early in the season, but we do have our first guest booked and another one in December. And one big thing as part of those discussions is asking whatever issue they're educating us on and helping us understand, what can I do to help this, what efforts can I make to help with this issue? And Amy, you just answered that for the library. You're not telling everybody else what to do, but you're making a personal choice to do what you can do in your part. However, that expands, right? Which I think is a great thing.
Yeah. It's just a small thing.
It's a small thing, but you're making a choice we all can make choices and make differences.
Right.
So
Yes.
kudos to you. High five.
Well, thank you. High five.
But everybody else, you be it.
Yeah. Okay. So one of the things that I came across when we were doing our book discussion, I was like, oh, I do want to share this. There's another podcast out there, and not often do we say, go listen to another podcast, but here I am saying it. But this podcast is called If Books Could Kill. I don't know if you have heard of this.
Oh, but I like the catchy name.
I know, isn't it kind of fun? Well, it's
yeah.
two guys, Michael Hobbs and Peter Shamshiri, and they're just adorable to listen to. And they talk a lot about books that are like pop science, is what they call it. Those popular nonfiction books that are that might sway the way people think about things.
Oh, wow.
Yes. So they call it, they talk about books that are super spreader events of American stupidity. So they're pretty funny. I'm just gonna say that. They're very funny.
Which, do you have an
Okay.
episode that you'd recommend as a starter from what you've heard so far?
Well, so I listened to one of them that as I went through their list and it was like, okay, what books have I read that I would like to listen to this? And one of them was Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus,
Okay.
because I will tell you that was a book that I think about a lot. And when there are situations, it's like, oh, that's the difference between men and women. And it's like that title comes back to my mind. And it was kind of that they really tore it apart. And it made me shift the way I thought about that book. So that's why I like it
Oh
because
my God, they rip on the five love languages and Atomic Habits.
I know. And I listened to Atomic Habits. That was another one because I was like, oh, Sandy and I really dug into Atomic Habits.
Right.
And I love Atomic Habits. And I will tell you, the one on Atomic Habits uh, isn't as harsh as the Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. Oh,
Right.
they pick on a few things, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'll give you that. But they're not really getting into it. I haven't listened to the five love languages. I did listen to the Nudge a couple of times, and I haven't read that book,
I have.
but
It's been a while.
it was
They
kind
go
of
after Malcolm Gladwell in the Outliers. I say go after. I should stop saying, but we're not used to critics, right? Like
yeah, yeah,
the
yeah. They do go after. That's what these books, and so it's kind of I really enjoy it because number one, they're funny. They don't take themselves too seriously, but they also challenge us not to take these books very seriously because most of the people writing aren't scientists and things like that. It's more of a it's just culturally we grabbed it and we're like, oh, this is it. And so
So
anyway,
two questions for you. One is it looks like it's fairly new. The first episode I see is November 1st of 2022. Is that correct?
yes.
And the second thing is a rating shows up because I just pulled it up in Apple Podcasts and it has 4.7 out of 5. And you know how they always show like 5 star and then they'll show a 1 star. And the 1 star says they openly admit they don't read the books. Is that true? Or do you have to read the books to critique them?
I would say so what they do, one of them usually reads the books or knows the book, and the other one is asking the questions. So
Okay,
they
so
kind of
that's an
trade
unfair
off.
comment by this person because
Yeah.
they both didn't, but if one does, then you can, yeah, okay,
Now that's the ones that I've listened to. They
okay,
might have some that they're like, I don't read I didn't, we neither one of us read the book. So that
okay,
could be,
okay.
but they poke fun at stuff and they're funny and it's just a lighthearted listen. So, and it just, yeah, I think I already
And
said this.
it's funny because you say book, what it's called. My mom's made the comment before. If we don't, she made the comment when we read a book and not everybody loved it, some didn't like it. She said, well, nobody ever got dumber from reading a book. And that line we keep repeating
Right,
because it's like, they're not all going to catch all of us, but did we take steps backwards from reading it?
right,
We're all good.
right. Yes, yes, yes. Um, so yeah, I wanted to share that podcast because I thought it was pretty good. And I'm just going to tell you, I think it's kind of trendy because I got that referral from my daughter, my 20 something year old daughter, that her and all of her friends listen to it.
Cool.
So
So I'm dying to know, we're talking about unbanned books. I'm dying to know if there's any books that you've seen on the banned lists that are books that either are favorites of yours or books that I found that I've read a lot of the books on the banned list. Um,
yeah.
well, To Kill a Mockingbird is on some of the banned lists. That's one of my favorite books of all time, and it shifted me as a child to think more critically as a young adult.
Yes. Yes. Well, I went through one. So number one, I found several lists.
Okay.
And So I had a hard time being like, okay, which
One,
list do I look at? But one that I found, yes, I've read several of the books, like The Kite Runner is on it,
which
which
is a great book.
which is a great book. And I don't know why it's on the list.
There
That's
were
where,
some violent parts, but that's all I can think of.
right. And then, and The Kite Runner is number 11 on this list. Hunger Games,
That was just fantasy. Interesting.
To Kill a Mockingbird, which I'm surprised. The Glass Castle is on this list.
That was such a good book. And
I
that
know.
one has stayed with me my whole life too, because I'll tell you what it gave me was more empathy to other people's situations. And rather than judging, knowing that, first of all, you don't know who you're born into. And secondly, mental illness plays a high part of it, right?
Yes. Speaking of that, one of the books I read recently was Educated. Have you done that
I
one?
loved Educated.
Yeah, it's similar to The Glass Castle, where it's
That's those stories stay with me. And I knew people in my small town that had parents that probably, if given the opportunity, they would have been the survivalists.
right,
I
right. And
think
just, yeah,
part of this goes back to back to banned books. My mom's point on, well, it doesn't make you any dumber. Why take them away from people in general? Let them read the book. And, it's kind of like saying people can't derive opinions or thoughts by themselves without restricting what we show them. I don't know. I don't, you know,
right,
sure there are some things that maybe there's some things that should be, but everything we're talking about, I just don't understand.
right. And I always think that the more you are exposed to different things, the more it opens up conversations
Right.
of, okay, I don't understand this, so I'm going to look into this, or I'm going to ask questions. And that was always my approach with my children, was you can read anything, and here we are, I'm here to have a conversation with you, like I remember when Reagan wanted to read Harry Potter, and that was like, oh, you're going to let your second grader read Harry Potter? And I was like, yeah, if I will read it with her. And, this was when Harry Potter was fairly new ish. And it was like, oh, that's so scary. And one of my friends said, her mind will only go as far as her mind will go. So the scary to her was this big. And as an adult, it was this big, So, but her mind won't take her to the adult scary.
That's a great point.
Right. I thought that made me feel much better about it. And we had fun reading Harry Potter, and it was good.
And I know we're getting close on time here, but I'm making a mental note since we are bringing in a couple of guests, um, a season. I think we said we're at least bringing a couple guests in each season. In the book club that I attend from the local bookstore here in Durango, we have a librarian that comes to it, and she's our age. And I figured that out later because I'm like, oh, she has really good perspectives, and she had good recommendations. And she came with a shirt about banning books, and she had shared that they get harassed a lot. That people that are for banning of books will come in and she's like, I'm the librarian. Like they get a lot of harassment, which I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Um, but I loved her perspectives in general, and her thought process, and she'd be somebody good to talk to. I'd love to hear from her what that looks and feels like from a librarian. I mean, she's there
Right.
to provide books to further the minds of the public, right? That's what she
Right.
does. So I
That
think
would
she's
be very,
interesting people to talk to.
yeah, she would be interesting. And I feel so bad for them. It's almost like what teachers are going through with
Right.
kids, and just, yeah, yeah. Just, and so going through this band list, I know we need to wrap up, but I want to share, I was going through it, and one of the books was The House of Spirits. Have you read that?
No, but I love Isabel. I've read a lot of hers, but I have not read that one.
Isabel Allende, I guess, or Allende. I don't know how
I
you
I
say
think
it.
it is Allende. I think
Is it
it's one of
Allende?
them.
I have
Oh,
read something else of hers too, but this was on the list. And I had it at my house because I think my mom gave it to me or something, and I just haven't read it yet. So now I'm like, oh, I think I need to read this book
She's a great writer.
because it's on a banned list.
I can't
All
even
right.
imagine.
We should probably wrap it
Yeah, because
up.
we got to go and read, Amy. We need to
I
leave. It's
know.
Friday. We need to read.
I am inspired to do some reading this weekend. So thank you, Sandy. And as always, it was lovely to chat with you.
All right. Happy reading. When I'm 2 podcasts in a row, my
Right.
favorite things to talk about. All right. Bye, Amy.
Bye, Sandy.